Hello and welcome to Colleague 7 Sprint Review for 18.02.01. This will cover the work undertaken between the 6th of February to the 19th of February. Starting with the sprint goal, and for this sprint we've continued to enhance and refine the search alongside other minor bug fixes and enhancements based on client feedback. Looking at the high level items and to explain further, so in this sprint we've added the option to search by ownership. We've addressed an issue which resulted in yes/no fields appearing as ones and zeros in the search results. A tooltip which displays the history text on mouse over has now been deployed to all history tabs. There is now an option to hide skill parents, which we'll go through in the demo. The delete company address process now works as expected. You can assign an address when creating a contact rather than it defaulting to the primary address. And we've implemented a restriction to the delete lookup code option so that users aren't able to delete system lookup codes which are tied to workflow. We'll now go through a short demonstration on the key features from this sprint. Okay, so the first couple of points to cover relate to this search. And if we start with the ownership, the new ownership area that's been added to the search as a key component to the sprint. The ownership is obviously feeding from the teams area that is set up within admin. So within a candidate record you obviously have show ownership here, and you have this teams and users option, and you can assign ownership to various users or various teams against that record. And this area is obviously feeding from within the admin area. You've got this teams section where you can go about adding teams and users and obviously assigning them to user records against the system. So you create your hierarchy in here, you add the hierarchy against records using within this area here, and that's obviously against the contact and the company also. And now we have within the search against the different search options the ability to obviously search by that ownership as well. So you can select by team and it will select the users within that team, or you can select just obviously by individual user, and it will also do a search based on that individual user. So if we do a search by team there and bring through the results, you'll be able to see that obviously you've got ownership that's assigned there, and then obviously you can see that obviously ownership is assigned to an individual user, but also ownership has been assigned at a team level. So that covers ownership in terms of its ability to be searched upon moving forwards. Another point to cover is yes/no fields, and it's essentially a bug fix. But what we were seeing is with yes/no fields, it was treating a yes as a 1 and a no as a 0 in the different yes/no fields that are available to be searched, and obviously when they're appearing in the search results, they're appearing incorrectly. So that's now been resolved as well. So those are two specific elements in the search that were fixed during this sprint. Okay, so the next couple of points to cover are minor UI updates to any records that have a history tab and or a skills tab associated to them. So if we go to a history of this candidate, what we've introduced against the history text is a tooltip on mouse over. So you'll notice that obviously history text, the column width to history text can only be so wide, and obviously some histories will be cut off from here. And what that was doing is creating a situation where there was a dependency for users to having to open up histories to view the full history text, and that could obviously get frustrating for users. So what we've done is introduce this tooltip so that someone can obviously navigate through the different histories and quickly view the history text without the need to open up the records if they don't want to. So there's a minor update that's been made there. On the skills tab, what we've introduced is a list option setting. So this was, and this is the same sort of format as was with version 6 for those that had version 6 previously, and the default setting previously to this being put in place was a show all parent setup. So you saw the entire hierarchy of parent skill, sub-parents, and obviously the child skill associated as well. What can be a preference for some users is basically to have just a straight list of associated skills, and also there's an option as well to just show the first parents, that's the immediate parent above the child skill as well, to give some context to the skill. So that now is available as an option, and there's also settings that go with this as well, user settings and global settings for default assignments. So against your user settings, you'll see in here the default view for allocated skills. And here you can set whether or not you want it to be either of these options, and then obviously whenever you're viewing a skills tab, it will display that list option based on your preference. So those are the updates that we made there. The next point to cover relates to the company entity, and specifically the option to delete a main address. So previously this functionality simply didn't work. The delete address option was an element that needed to be introduced. So now what we can do is on selection of an address, obviously the contacts associated with that address will appear on the right hand side here. We've also introduced an include leavers option in here as well, just to essentially follow the same format that we have on the contacts list of include leavers here. You can now do that on the addresses section as well. But what you can do is obviously delete an address. So you can highlight address here, you can hit delete. It will obviously request you to confirm whether you want to delete that address. Now if you have only one address against that company, it's going to tell you that you can't do that, because essentially there needs to be a single address against the company record. And so in that instance you would edit the company. If you have contacts associated to the address that you are looking to delete, on hitting yes, it's going to ask you to essentially move those contacts to another address, so you can specify which address you're moving those to. If that address that you're deleting is a primary address, it's also going to ask you to assign the new primary address as part of this process when you're selecting which address you're looking to move these contacts to. And there, from there onwards, obviously pressing OK, that address has now been deleted, and obviously this contact has now been moved in and amongst the contacts associated with that address now. So that's the delete address functionality that's been added as part of this release. Staying with the company record, the next point to cover, and it could also be covered by creating a contact from the contact selection screen or from the quick access menu here, creating a contact. But essentially what you can do now is select an address when creating a contact. So you can select an address there against the contact record as you're creating it. That's just a minor update that was made against the company for the creation of a contact record. The last point to cover relates to the lookups area and the ability to delete lookups. So the option to delete lookups as a user permission has been in place for some time, but as part of giving users the ability to delete lookups, what we did in fact introduce was a scenario where lookups could be deleted, which would actually go on to affect workflow if not protected. So what we've done now is ensure that, what we've done is ensure that system codes can't be deleted as part of that. System codes are essentially lookup codes that link in with workflow and have direct links with workflow in terms of them being run. So that relates to history codes, certain specific history codes that are being triggered by workflow. It relates to certain elements, example being document type, profile picture, for example. These are codes that need to exist within the systems so that standard functionality can work without issue. So by introducing the restriction that we have done now, it just prevents the scenario of a user being able to essentially break workflow by deleting the wrong lookup. How that's defined is obviously just by this padlock option being against it. On selection of any other lookup, you'll see this option for delete lookup if you have that user permission set. But on selection of a system lookup, that delete lookup option essentially just won't be there. And it's as simple as that in terms of its restriction. We try to make it quite straightforward so that there's not the ability for a user to override this. But that's the update that we've made there in terms of restricting the deletion of certain lookups. As always, if you have any queries or feedback, please get in touch. I'll be keen to hear from you. Also, for those using Colleague 7, feel free to submit your enhancement requests via the support team or directly to me using the above email address. The next video will be the sprint plan for 18.02.02, and as part of that I'll include a quick overview on the points we intend to work on during that sprint. Thanks for watching.